Welcome back to the Looney Left, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about what is, in my opinion, our second most important right, second only to the right to life. Now, this right, of course, is our right to keep and bear arms. It is the way by which we can protect all of our other rights, including our first and most important right, our right to life. Now, today we have with us a guest. I'd like to introduce him to you.
Hello there.
All right. So, as you can all assume, we are talking about the Second Amendment, which is drafted in 1791 along with the other nine amendments in the Bill of Rights, written by James Madison and George Mason. Now, as it reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, this right is often questioned by a lot of people, as we've seen a lot in recent years, but really, since Washington left office, it's been questioned over and over again. And many have said, well, it only refers to the military or it only refers to the National Guard. It doesn't actually refer to the individual. Well, today we're going to be explaining why these theories are just outright false. So I'd like to start this video by talking about the first part of the Second Amendment. We're going to be breaking it down part by part. So the first part, I'll just read it, is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. It's actually the first half. There's really only two parts to this amendment. So that part says that a well-regulated militia is necessary to maintaining a free state. So people often question, well, what is this well-regulated militia? And it's actually that phrase that leads people to believe that this amendment is only speaking of the military or the National Guard or of a regulated militia group that is not the people. But the co-author and the co-author of the Second Amendment and father of the Bill of Rights, George Mason, once said when asked about what the militia was, he said, I ask, sir, what is the militia? It is the whole people. To disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them. And again, that was a quote from George Mason, the father of the Bill of Rights and co-author of the Second Amendment, co-authored with James Madison. So what he is saying in this quote is that the militia refers to a group of the people who exercise the right to keep and bear arms. It isn't the military or the National Guard or a well-regulated militia is referring to the people. It's referring to a people-regulated, not government-regulated militia. So the National Guard, the military, those are militias regulated by the government and trained by the government. While the militia he speaks of is regulated by the people and controlled by the people, as our whole government should be, but the fact that it will not always be like that is why we have our Second Amendment. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the militia is there, controlled by the people, so that if the government were to infringe upon the people's rights, then they could use that militia
All right, yeah,
to protect their rights.
that's I'm pretty sure that's what they meant by that, as we can see actually by the next quote that I'm going to share with everyone. So, the next part I would like to talk about is, well, the second half of the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, there's a quote from George Washington that says, a free people ought not only be armed and disciplined, but they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government. Now, this quote, as I said earlier, again, is from George Washington, and he's saying this, basically saying that the reason we have the Second Amendment is for the people to defend against their government. It's not just there for hunting or for going and having some fun shooting at the shooting range, which I'll tell you I love shooting. That's like my favorite sport. I love going to the shooting range and just shooting at 100 yards and that feeling of getting a bullseye. It's amazing. It's great. I love shooting. I love hunting. And guns are important for defending yourself, your home, and your family, and your property, everything. That's why we have them, but it's not the main reason we have them. The Second Amendment is clearly states that the reason for us having guns is not to defend ourselves from criminals, it's to defend ourselves from the government. It's so that we can, should the government overstep its power, gather and defeat it with our well-regulated militia, which George Mason tells us is a militia of the people. So we hear a lot nowadays that you don't need an AR-15. But the thing is, you really do to fulfill the most important point of the Second Amendment, as George Mason and George Washington have told us. You know, you don't need an AR-15 to defend your house. You don't need an AR-15 to go hunting. You can hunt with a muzzleloader, and you can defend your house with a revolver. But and you certainly don't need an AR-15 to hit a target down 100 yards or something like that in the range. You can, well, actually, it's not even the best gun for doing that. But you do need an AR-15 or something along the lines of it to fulfill the main purpose of the Second Amendment, and that is to defend against government tyranny. Now, I would like to put a disclaimer into this video. I am not suggesting anybody starts a rebellion. I think there is no need for a rebellion right now. The government has not overstepped its power, and there are so many things that have to be done before something like this even is considered. We look back at the American Revolution, and there was the Olive Branch petitions. Common Sense was written by Thomas Paine. The Declaration of Independence. So many things happened before arms were taken up. It should never be a first resort, and it should really be a last resort. That's what the Second Amendment was designed to be. Not as a first resort. Oh, the government overstepped its power. We got to go attack them. That's not the point of it. The point is that it is a last resort. So the government has denied all of our petitions. We've voted certain officials out, and they're still doing the same thing. We have written to them. We've expressed our beliefs. We've said absolutely everything. And then when the government threatens you, as George Washington says, never be the first one to start a fight. Actually, George Washington didn't say that, but he implies in his quote that the government must abuse the people first before you can take up arms against it. So before anybody goes to the comments and says that I'm encouraging a rebellion, I'm not. I'm just explaining the point of the Second Amendment. This is not a call to arms to anybody, and nobody should be taking up arms against the government right now. So with that said, what are your thoughts on the real purpose of the Second Amendment?
Well, yeah, the real purpose is to defend against the government tyranny if they were to ever overstep their bounds or infringe upon our rights.
All right.
Ever.
So now I'd like to move on to the final point I would like to make. Now, the four most important words in the Second Amendment are shall not be infringed. Now, people seem to not understand what shall not be infringed means. Now, they'll say that, the Constitution or the Second Amendment it just doesn't put any restrictions on the ownership of the people's right to bear arms. It doesn't place any restrictions, but it doesn't make illegal any restrictions later on in the future. Actually, I think even at one point the Supreme Court said that, but I'm going to say it. That is as wrong as wrong can be. An infringement is any limitation on a right or on anything at all. And the word shall not means it cannot happen. It is not allowed to happen. It should not happen, and if should it happen, it should be punished. The act or the person who placed that infringement should be punished because they're violating one of our most important rights. So shall not be infringed means it cannot happen. You cannot place an infringement on this right. This right is completely protected by this amendment. And any infringement upon this right is unconstitutional according to the Second Amendment. So every gun law, with the exception of, background checks before you buy a gun, and maybe a concealed carry permit, you need to have a permit to carry the gun. Anything other than that is unconstitutional. Anything saying you can't have this many rounds in a magazine, that's unconstitutional. That's an infringement of the people's right. Saying you can't own this type of gun because it shoots too quickly, that too is an infringement upon this right and is therefore unconstitutional. So really, anybody without a criminal past should be able to buy a gun and buy whatever they need. It's to shoot it. It's not right for there to be any limitation. So Beto O'Rourke of Texas once said that he fully supports our right to own guns for recreational purposes, for hunting and for self-defense, home defense, but he does not support our ownership of guns to stand up against the government. Now, in saying that, it's really the exact opposite of why we have our guns to begin with. We don't have our guns for recreational purposes, and we can use them for that, but that's not why we have them. We have them to defend our rights against the government, should it overstep its power. And not just the government, there are many other people who it could be, but primarily it is the government that the Constitution refers to in this, the Second Amendment, I should say. So it's not it's not right that these people are supporting part of our rights for having or our reason for having their guns, but they're not the main reason. They're 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 scared of us taking their power from them, and it's just part of the power grabs that we see in almost everything the left does. They but their main goal is to take away our guns because if we don't have guns, then we can't fight back against their tyranny. And and as George Mason said, and as Washington has said, and even Thomas Jefferson, without our guns, it's so much easier for the government just to enslave us and make us slaves and abuse every other right that we have. Without our right to defend our rights, we cannot have any other rights other than possibly our life.
My final point I like to make is you don't need any sort of fancy weaponry like a bazooka or something crazy like that. All you need is something that can defend yourself and your rights, if ever need be.
And what he's saying is actually, he makes a good point. We don't need a bazooka to fight, or an RPG would be the correct terminology, a rocket propelled grenade. I'm a bit of a gun fan, but anyways, we don't need it. We don't. And now a lot of people will say, well, you can't win a war against the government without a nuke, or you can't win a war against the government without some big bombs and without some tanks and without your armored vehicles. Truth is, you can, because there's actually a realistic statistic out there that says only 3.5% of the population is required to overthrow the government. Now that's a pretty easy percentage to meet. You see, there's so many people out there who are ex-military and who do not like what would be going on, and they would be glad to fight with a rebellion. They've got the training, and there's more people who are trained to fight in the military who are no longer in the military than there are people in the military right now. You see, it is very plausible that should something like this ever happen, it would be successful. And I'm not, obviously, like I said earlier, I'm not encouraging any rebellion. I mean, obviously, this is not a call to arms. If you're thinking about it, there's too many things you got to do first, and you need better reasons. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on right now that is not right. The government is not exactly what it should be, but it's not to the point they haven't outright abused our rights yet. They obviously haven't been putting soldiers in our house. You know, we haven't had soldiers quartering in our houses. We haven't anything like that yet. The intolerable acts have not happened. I mean, yeah, taxes may be a bit unfair, and the way they are being spent is very unfair, and it's not. That's not the only reason the American colonists had to start the first American Revolution. Now, people will say that it's not possible, but it is because you think about it. Every tank has to stop for gas, and somebody's got to get out to do it. Yeah, that's a perfect opportunity for somebody to throw a grenade into a tank. You know, there's so many things that just have to be done that do actually make these things plausible. And, you know, it is very plausible that it could be done. So there is no reason to take away our rights and you can't justify it with saying, well, it isn't going to work anyway, so there's no reason to have it in the first place, because it very well actually would likely work because the military takes an oath it takes an oath before all the people in the military. They take an oath to defend and preserve the Constitution. So should the government disobey or infringe our rights, the military theoretically is not even going to defend them. Now, sure, there'll be some people who will, and obviously all of them are not all of them are going to disagree with the government, but the ones who do would likely defect and fight with a rebellion. It is the way it works. And sheriffs, they take a oath to uphold the Constitution. So when they decide to go and collect their guns, they're gonna have to find some other way to do it than the sheriffs because they aren't gonna do it. And believe it or not, they're actually the only elected law enforcement office held is the role of a sheriff. That is the only office that is elected in law enforcement. But yeah, so it really is. There's no justification in saying that a rebellion would not be successful, and that right alone is a reason to take away the guns because we don't need them because it's never going to work. That is a poor justification because it is very plausible. There's a lot of factors that would go in the favor of rebellion, and then just look at the Russian Revolution too. That happened in 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks. It was in less than a month. The American Revolution was completely different because it was a war going on between really two sovereign nations at that point. From the time the Declaration of Independence was signed the United States was a sovereign nation of its own, and it was really an invasion of England into the United States, and we were fighting it off. So it was, in a way, not even a revolution at that point. It was the American Revolution because England still recognized us as part of their country and not of our own sovereign nation. But it wasn't. It was a lot different from your average revolution where it's somebody overthrowing a government because the government of England was not overthrown. That government is still intact today. It was replaced with another government. See, that's another very important part that is mentioned in the Declaration of Independence is that the government is not overthrown, it is replaced. That government can still rule those who want to be ruled by it. And I think that's another reason in the Civil War, they did not start a rebellion, the Confederacy. They formed their own union. Not it was the Confederacy, but they formed their own sovereign, well, in their eyes, sovereign nation. It wasn't because they did not win the Civil War. But they formed their own nation, in a sense, and fought the old government to be free. They did not want to overthrow the government. They wanted to let the North still be ruled by the United States government. They just wanted to replace it. That's the difference between the United States and so many other countries who've had revolutions. Other countries overthrow the government. They get rid of it and they replace it with a new one. We just replace it and we let the other one rule those who want to be ruled by it. The people have the right to be ruled by the government they want to rule. They want to be ruled by. If the people don't want a government of the people, they don't have to have a government of the people. And that's one of the foundations of this country. You have the right to be ruled by who you want to be ruled by. And that's really the justification for our first American Revolution. And hopefully our only. I hope that there will never come to a point where that ever has to happen, that the Second Amendment should ever need to be used. Because as I said earlier in the video, it is a last resort. It is not the first resort. And anybody who takes it as the first resort is gravely mistaken. There are so many other things that need to be done first. There needs to be peaceful petitions to get things accomplished and to replace the government through peaceful means, not through violence, because violence should be at all costs avoided. Well, thank you everyone for watching this video, and I'd like to say thank you for our guest for coming on.
Thank you for having me here. It was a pleasure.
No problem. Yeah, I'm glad to have you on anytime. I'd love having guests on. It's great to have other people to discuss these issues with me. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for watching, tuning in to watch the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave a dislike. That's what it's there for. Please comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can spread this channel and spread the truth to more and more people. God bless America, God bless you, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.